than we've done in the past, but I think we can do it. Please think about donating your lunch money today for the foundation. All tend to give about how much I would earn on my commute back and forth. So please follow that link there. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jason Burke to talk about East scholarships.
Thank you, Eric. The East Scholarship is a $5,000 scholarship given to both Butler and UIndy, and the award last year went to a number of students. Actually, I think we spread it around last year to quite a few, but it's a great committee to be on. And all I am asking for still, I have 2 interested parties. I'm asking for interviewers for the students, and I have the interview dates now, which are tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, April 6th from around 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and Tuesday, April 8th, same time, 4 to 7. We'll have one other session that might be half hour, 45 minutes, just talking about the candidates with each of the interviewing groups if they're different. So that's a pretty low time commitment, and I am seeking probably at this point another 3 to 5 or 6 people who are interested to see if we can't put together 2 good groups to do these interviews. So like I said, I have 2 folks right now, Max Harper and Justin, I think McBride. I'm not sure if Justin's going to be able to make it because of conflicts, but if you're interested, let me know. Give me some times that will work. If those don't work so that I have to change the times, I can. I'm sure we'll find enough people, but just reach out, please, in the next couple weeks and we'll get it set up.
Now, sounds great, Jason. Thanks, man, for leading that. And we'll keep plugging it every week until you've got your max capacity there. And I'll turn it over to Miss Julie Cooper, who is with George Washington Builders Club, and will give us an update on what their club has been up to.
Hi, thank you for inviting me today. Like it was mentioned, I am at George Washington Carver Montessori IPS School 87. We are located at 2411 Indianapolis Avenue. So if you come down 65 South, you will see a big banner that says Montessori 87. That is our school. And we've been doing Builders Club for at least 8 years. I took it over. And so it has been a rough year like anywhere else, but our students and myself, we've been doing Zoom meetings after the pandemic started in March. After the pandemic started in March and our school closed down, we still met on Zoom and talked about different needs for our school. So our proposal from last year didn't pan out, but we did use the money that was granted to us for needs around our school building. Especially, we did our candygram sales last year. We didn't get to do it this year, and we use that money to go back and support local community events as well that we sponsor at our school, but our Builders Club puts that all together. This year, we used a lot of our funding since of our families in need, especially at our building. We had a family that did not have bedding and a mattress, bedding, sheets, pillows, and my social worker and we head up Builders Club. And so we discussed with the kids that we needed, there was a family in need at our school, and they agreed that we would purchase the bedding, the mattresses part for that project. And then we had several staff members as our students reached out, and they donated blankets and pillows and different things like that. So we try to do a whole community within George Washington Carver, just not the Builders Club. We try to involve all of our staff and students within our building as much as we can, because that's part of our philosophy in Montessori. We also, we have some giving that our social worker has through another foundation for Christmas projects. So we decided to give to that and include a gift card to Kroger to get food for Christmas, as well to 50 of our neediest families. So that was all appreciated, and we tried to, use it as we could. Usually we make blankets for the shelter. Hopefully we'll get to do that as the new school year starts in the fall, and pick up our other things that we usually do. So it was a little tough of a year, but we were creative and we tried to do the best we could and help our community a little bit more within our school community. So
I thought you were just going to keep going, Julie. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, thank you so
can
much.
talk all day.
Oh,
if
thanks
you
so much for
want.
that summary. Yeah, our kids did Montessori on 96 in town for preschool, pre-K, kindergarten, and loved it. Oh my goodness. Like their curiosity and that foundation to appreciate learning and to approach it from that angle is amazing. So Julie, just be aggressive with your ask, with your grant request for the fall. So as good a job as these clubs are doing, looking a year ahead, just be aggressive, right? You don't get what you don't ask for. So just keep being aggressive. We appreciate your dedication and your help with the George Washington Builders Club. So I will turn it over to Mr. Steve Fierro, who will introduce today's speaker, Mr. Nate Feltman, CEO of the IBJ.
Thanks, Eric. I'll just go with the bio that was sent to me here. Nate Feltman is CEO and co-owner of IBJ Media, publisher of the Indianapolis Business Journal, Indiana lawyer, and the Court and Commercial Record. He writes a bi-monthly column for the Indianapolis Business Journal that covers business, politics, and community. As chairman of NJF Capital Group, Nate invests in and provides advice to companies in a variety of business sectors, including retail, entertainment, professional recruitment, and real estate. Previously, Nate owned and served as CEO of Indianapolis-based medical equipment provider Home Health Depot Incorporated, and he was appointed by Governor Mitch Daniels, serving as Secretary of Commerce for the state of Indiana and CEO of the IEDC from 2006 to 2008 as a member of Governor Daniels' cabinet. He also served as Executive Vice President and General Counsel to the IEDC originally. Nate was a partner with the law firms of Faegre Drinker and Ice Miller in Indianapolis and Altheimer Gray in Chicago, where his practice focused on representing public and private companies with their merger and acquisition activities, as well as advising local governments on public-private partnerships and economic development strategies. Before his U.S. legal experience, Nate practiced law in Moscow, Russia from 1994 to 1998 with the international law firm Baker & McKinsey, where he represented multinational companies seeking to do business in Russia. Nate holds a BS in business from the Kelley School of Business and a BA in political science from Indiana University Bloomington. He received his law degree from Indiana McKinney School of Law and a legal letters degree from Russian law from the Institute of State and Law, Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, Russia. Nate serves as chairman of the board of the Liberty Fund, a private educational foundation established to encourage the study of the ideal of a society of free and responsible individuals. And he serves on the board of directors of the National Bank of Indianapolis, the Pierre and Eden Goodrich Foundation, the Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation, the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce, the Indiana India Business Council. He also serves on the Dean's Advisory Council for the Hamilton Luger School of Global and International Studies at IU, and Board of Visitors for the McKinney School of Law. And he's past national chair of the Council of the IU Alumni Association. I know that Nate, in his editorials, writes on topics that are very important to us all, including the revitalization of downtown Indianapolis and the role of IMPD and Indianapolis's success as a sports business capital. And I hope to hear more from him today about what direction he sees Indianapolis going as we come out of a challenging year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nate Feltman.
Well, that was a nice introduction, long. So I don't know if there's enough time to actually, since the introduction was so long. I'm teasing. It's great to be with you all today and look forward, as was mentioned earlier, to have hopefully more of a conversation and try to answer any topics and questions on your minds. But I thought I would talk for a little bit just to give a feel. And it was nice, Steve, that you put up there some of the things I've written about, because I'm happy to try to tackle with all of you any your thoughts on some of those topics as well that you referenced, especially in the last year, the challenge that we've all faced and our city and state have faced in our country. But I'll start with IBJ. And would you like me to speak in Russian, by the way? Would that be better for some folks? No, okay, I'm teasing. But that's an interesting part of my experience, and happy to chat on people's interest in Russia as well. But so IBJ, so I've been only part of the IBJ for about 3.5 years, going on 4, and I've only been CEO for the last year. But so it's been a fantastic experience for me to be part of this community treasure, as I think of it, and that's the way my fellow shareholders and the folks who that name you might recognize, Mickey Maurer. Mickey founded the National Bank of Indianapolis, and the law school down in Bloomington, the lesser law school down in Bloomington, is named after him, compared to the law school here in Indianapolis. I'm teasing, of course, but Mickey and Bob Schloss are two guys who bought the IBJ back in 1990 and moved it back under Indiana ownership. It actually was acquired by an out-of-state group back in the late 80s. And a group that had a number of ownership interests in business journals around the country, and they were kind enough and good enough to bring it back, because I think and they thought that having a community newspaper such as the Indianapolis Business Journal was very important for our community. So I'll touch on IBJ a little bit, and then I'm happy to dive into, especially recently, some of the topics that I've written about as part 2 at the IBJ, including the future of Indy and what I think and see happening, and talking about, of course, the COVID impact and what that might mean for our city, and positive and negative. And then lastly, I think it'd be fun to talk a little bit about the NCAA tournament and some of the history. I've written on that, and I've done a lot of study on that, and talked to a lot of the players who really were involved in the very beginning of our city and state's efforts to make amateur sports a big part of our city and state. And without that early effort, going all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s, what we see today, which is of course unprecedented, having the entire NCAA tournament played in Indianapolis, without their early efforts, we wouldn't be about to experience what our city is about to experience. So those are the 3 topics I thought I'd touch on here briefly at the beginning. The first, IBJ. So what I love about the IBJ is the ability for the IBJ to participate in a community conversation. And what I mean by that is, all of you, I'm 50, so I grew up reading a hard copy newspaper, like some of you I can tell on the call might be my contemporaries. And I still today love the hard copy newspaper. I'm trying to convert to digital. I do read a lot of things digitally, but I'm still a paper and digital guy now, but still get the Indianapolis Star. There's not many people who I run into that are still getting it, but maybe some of you are. I still do. And of course the IBJ and some other publications. But I'm a big believer that local news and local newspapers are really, really important in whatever format. So of course, it may be digital, more digitally going forward for the young folks that are coming of age. Most of them are not going to read a hard copy. That's just reality. I was shocked when I went down to Bloomington not long ago, went before COVID, and went into the Union building and didn't see one person with a textbook. Everybody had their laptops or their Apple iPads, and textbooks are a thing of the past. And so the young people graduating from college, they're likely not to be paper subscribers, and that's okay. But today the IBJ touches those that are engaged with us in so many different ways. And I think that's the future. We have about 80,000 people in central Indiana that receive in some form in IBJ, either email, or they're a subscriber, or they listen to our podcast. Actually, the numbers are higher than that when I think about the podcast. But today we have a weekly podcast. We have what's called once a month within the IBJ. It's a supplement called Forefront, and that's a kind of all perspectives view of relevant issues of the day. It could be on gun rights, it could be on free speech, but you have included in that Forefront both the center, right, and left perspectives, and a civil written dialogue. We have about 16 events a year that cover so many different topics. They're niche topics from what's happening in aerospace to our economy, and then we have different award events as well. So there's lots of ways we touch people. But I'll just go back on just in terms of the local news and the importance of media in general. So of course, it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum politically or ideologically. I think all of us can agree that media has had a bad rap the last number of years, and maybe for good reason, some would say. And but I think we all can agree that it's pretty hard to turn on the television today and not have an opinion one way or another. When I was growing up, I was a little young for Walter Cronkite, but I remember him a little bit. I remember certainly Tom Brokaw, and I certainly remember Russell on Meet the Press. And these folks tended to be, pretty even-handed, not always, but most of the time, pretty balanced. And that has gone away today. And certainly, media, what we call, the era of fake news is real, right? I mean, we all know if you're on social media, there's some real stuff on there. There's a lot of fake stuff on there. So in general, media has got a bad name. It doesn't matter whether you're left, right, or middle. That's been the case. But I'm a huge believer that without the media, of course, it's always referred to as the fourth estate, right? The fourth branch of government, because the media is critically important in holding, our elected officials in the public sector, and then certainly in the private sector, accountable. There's a reason why media from the very beginning of our country was incredibly important, and there were newspapers and newsletters right at the founding of our country that our founders thought were incredibly important to get news out in the community and to hold them and others accountable. So today, as most of you know, the Indianapolis Star, it used to be the Indianapolis News. Now we just have the Indianapolis Star. And if you look at the number of reporters at the Star today, we've hired a number of them, but they're about 1/4 of what they were. Number of reporters is down to about 25% of what they had if you go back 20 years ago. So you have less reporters covering City Hall. You have less reporters covering the state. And, again, no matter what your political beliefs may be, that's not a great thing for a democracy when you have less coverage and less accountability. So at the IBJ, we're doing our best. We've expanded our political coverage. We now have a new political newsletter that we started when I became involved. That comes out every Friday, called The Rundown. We are looking at some other expansion options and doing our best. We do have a city reporter that she covers both city and state. And so we're trying to do our part. We haven't shrunk in the last few years. In fact, we're up one in our reporting. We have about 9 reporters today, but it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to, in terms of the revenue that supports newspapers and news in general. As you all know, there are so many different options today and to spend your dollars when you're advertising. So we are in that marketplace as well. So I'm happy to talk, anything more in terms of your ideas and thoughts and the media in general. I'm enjoying it very much. It's been a wonderful opportunity to try to compete in a difficult, sometimes competitive environment. But I'm a big believer in the necessity of good local news, trusted and factual local news. We try really hard at the IBJ to get it right. We don't always get it right. When we realize we've gotten something wrong, we try to correct it as soon as possible. So that's a little bit about the IBJ. In terms of topics that I've written about, and maybe that might be the most interesting kind of conversation, is what is the future of our city? I've written about, we have become in a very positive way. Our downtown the last 40 years, especially the downtown, has been built around a strategy around sports and convention business. And when COVID hit, we felt the impact immediately in terms of restaurants that were supported by the convention and sports business, in terms of course, the hotels. Does anybody have a guess? You're on mute, I know, but a guess of how many hotel rooms were downtown in 1980? If anybody's got a guess, you can raise your hand, but it's quite astonishing. So in 1980, I heard this stat last week when I was interviewing some of the folks who were involved in the early process. 1980, we had 317 hotel rooms downtown Indianapolis, which is quite a startling fact given that we are about 14,000 today. So the expansion of our downtown, which includes expansion of the hotels and the conference centers and the ballrooms and on and on and on, is really a function of what some of the folks who are still involved and engaged today dreamt up back in the late 70s, early 80s. And so in terms of COVID, there's a lot of speculation, and it is speculation about, what this means. Is this a short-term or a long-term situation vis-a-vis some of the outflow of people and companies from places like New York and California and Chicago? In other words, are some of these folks who have left places like New York, we'll take that for example, are they going to go back to New York, or are they going to stay in Florida where they've recently moved? And Florida has experienced, I think I heard in the last 12 months, about 300,000 new inhabitants of Florida, and New York has had a pretty big exodus. I had a pretty interesting conversation yesterday with a fellow who's an urban planner and who is following these types of trends, and he's kind of at a little bit of just trying to guess what whether this is short term or long term. He tends to believe it's short term. I tend to believe it's short term as well, but I do believe that cities like Indianapolis have immense opportunity that may be even more enhanced as a result of the experience that we've all gone through the last year, where there's a feeling of maybe I don't want to live in a 25 or 50 story apartment building. Maybe I want to have a little bit more space. And there are of course so many other factors, right, that go into people choosing cities and leaving cities. And so I think those factors are actually more important long-term than COVID, and that means taxes, and that means the environment for business and regulation, and all those types of things. And I think long-term, that's more likely to have the bigger impact of why people might leave a city, because I do, as we all know, the trend from rural to urban is about a couple hundred years old, and that's not that trend is likely not to go away. And the urbanist that I talked to, or the city planner that I talked to, said, the thing that we all miss and that will not change is the desire of humans to want random encounters. And random encounters means everything. It can mean an idea that you never would have come up with but for running into somebody and having a conversation. It could be a new innovation at your company that it came about because you were interacting with one of your colleagues. And so that need and desire of humans to want to have, he called them random encounters. And I thought, I hadn't quite heard it that way. And I thought that's pretty interesting. But I think that's all kind of what we've been missing. Zoom is okay for some things like we're doing today, but it's not quite the same as go and have a cup of coffee with somebody or your colleague bumping into them in the hallway. So I'll go back to the city of Indianapolis. I think the city has an immense opportunity. I don't think there's a lot of discussion. I've been part of that discussion and some of the things I wrote about whether we need to have a new strategy, not just be focused on sports and convention. And I don't think that we ever should give up on what we have done in this area, because it is a big part of our city. And I think it has room to grow. When some of our city planners and people engaged civically, when they got into this, they had no idea how big sports was going to be in terms of the growth of sports itself. I mean, all of us understand what's happened with NFL and how it's become such an entertainment piece of our lives. What the Super Bowl is today versus what it was in 1980, unbelievable, right? So I don't think we should give up on it, because we have so many assets and we have so many advantages already. But I do think that we need to think about diversifying, and we have been doing that, but we need to continue that effort. The thing that I most worry about, and that I think is critically important, is and this goes to this urban planner I talked to yesterday. His point was, young people, when they choose cities, they're choosing cities because they want to go to a city where there are lots of places to meet other young people and lots of places to jog and to bike and to have those random encounters. And so as we think about where our city needs to go in the future, I've been really, and the IBJ has written a lot about this, and I'm afraid there's still not yet a rallying cry yet. But if any of you have been to Circle City Mall, if you haven't been back there in some time, you will be shocked to see what we have there today, which is a decaying asset. Where, of course, department stores that once were there are gone now. Some of the restaurants that were sustaining some of it are gone now. It's a huge part of the downtown area. That block that I'll recall in 1994 or 5, when I was in law school, there were just holes in the ground and facades. And the Circle City Mall served the city well for a good period of time for the convention business and the downtown growth. But it is now time for those that own the mall and to come in and to make a change, because that area could be turned into a gathering place. Like some of you may know of the Carmel development along the Monon in downtown Arts District. What you see there is what young people want. And if you've been to Wrigley Field and see what they've done outside Wrigley Field, the Ricketts family, there's space to meet and to play and have a beverage of your choice, all those kinds of things. And so that's a huge opportunity. The other thing that is already happening that needs to happen is, as you know, we're going to need less space going forward because work is going to change. And so we got to be really thoughtful about what we do and what we do with all the commercial real estate that's going to be, some of it's already on the market, and there's going to be more of it as leases expire. I often think that the market will take care of that, and you've already seen that. The AT&T building on Meridian is currently being converted. It was 100% a business, AT&T. Now it was bought by a local developer. That's going to turn into apartments, and that's what you're going to see a lot more of, and should see a lot more of. And that's a positive thing for downtown Indianapolis. We need more people living downtown, staying downtown, playing downtown. As you know, we're still having an exodus that began a long time ago of people choosing suburbs of different sorts outside the core of the downtown. And I'm a big believer that we have to have a strong downtown. I think it's imperative that we think thoughtfully about how we grow and attract people to our downtown. So that's some of my thoughts. We got to be very thoughtful in terms of what we, some economists call placemaking. I think there's a lot more we could do as a city on that front. I'll just touch on, I've written about this, and it's troubling to me, and so happy to talk about it. But the experience we've had the last year, where we had riots downtown and damage downtown, violence downtown. Of course, nobody wanted that to happen, but I feel that there has been an overreaction by our legislature, the supermajority, the Republicans are a supermajority in the legislature, to some of what they claim or feel is, not enough action on the part of the mayor of Indianapolis. And you can agree or disagree with that. That's not that is what it is or isn't. But what the legislature's been trying to do is take away. It was mentioned, IMPD, control of IMPD, for example, take away, transit dollars and ability to have more transit in our city. And the list goes on. I mean, silly stuff like not allowing a city to change its name. Some of you may say that's not silly, but there's no effort by anybody to change the name of Indianapolis. And there's some silliness that goes on in our legislature. But the bottom line is, again, to me, it doesn't matter where your perspective is on the political side, but a mayor of any city, whether you're a Republican or Democrat or independent, needs to be able to make decisions and is the closest on the ground to what's happening in their city. They have to be able to make those decisions, and then they're held accountable every 4 years, right? And that's when you make a change. So there's been a lot written about, and there's a lot of discussion about what's going on in the legislature. I think it's very harmful when a state legislature made up of folks, of course, from all over the state, rural and urban, but are making decisions and trying to make decisions on behalf of Indianapolis. I think that should be more left to local decision making and the mayor. Lastly, I'll just talk about the NCAA and what we're getting ready to experience. I think probably most of you know the background, so I don't want to spend a ton of time, but this is a 4-decade effort, and the very beginning was back in the first kind of pivotal moment for our city was back in 1982, and that's when we landed what was called the Olympic Festival, Olympic Festival was an event that occurred every 2 years, or I should say every 4 years, but the 2 years before the Olympics. And so 1982, we were able to land that. That was kind of the beginning, which led to eventually the effort to land the Pan Am Games in 1987, which was successful. And that event, the Olympic Festival was of course the beginning, but that event of the Pan Am Games really is pretty instrumental, I think, in our city's history, because it was the beginning of what I call an amazing volunteerism that our city enjoys, I think, more than most. And it's also a civic pride and engagement that our city, once again, I think enjoys more than most. And I think those two elements are a huge part of, what I've sometimes and others have said, the secret sauce of Indianapolis is that people are willing, Hoosiers are willing to roll up their sleeves and go to work for something that's bigger than themselves or their business. It's pride in our city and our state. And that's something that Indiana and Indianapolis should be really proud of, and it is just special. It's special about our city and our state. The other pivotal moment after that was in the late 90s, moving the NCAA headquarters. We convinced the leadership of the NCAA to move from Kansas City, where they had historically been for decades, to Indianapolis. That was a very special moment, because we had hosted a Final Four in 1980. The first Final Four we hosted was in 1980. So we knew some of the players very well at the NCAA, but the effort to get them here it has paid such dividends in so many different ways. One of the things that happened soon after they moved here was a promise to hold the Final Four here every 5 years. That has been phenomenal. Then also, they promised to hold 90% of the NCAA committee meetings in Indianapolis. So you brought coaches and university presidents from all over the country to Indianapolis. Huge dividends. So that the economic impact of the NCAA is estimated to be over $1 billion since it moved here. It's a huge impact to our city. And it really, but for, let me add one more piece. we established this Indiana Sports Corporation, and that was part of the early effort with the Pan Am Games. And that continues to be an incredibly important player in our city. Ryan Vaughn, who used to be president of the City County Council, is now leading that effort and doing a wonderful job. But as some of you may know, Ryan and his team in September, before it was in question whether the NCAA tournament or even the season, the basketball season would even be held in September. He came out and said, hey, we've got an opportunity because we have assets in downtown Indianapolis. We have 4,500 hotel rooms connected to the convention center, connected to Lucas Oil and Bankers Life. We can create a bubble just like the NBA and do it safely and with all the protocols and all the things that need to be in place to make this a bubble and do it safely. This was before even a decision had been made about the college basketball season itself, let alone the tournament. And he by putting that out there and being aggressive on the front end, it planted a seed that eventually, ripened and turned into what we know today. But it's all this history, and it's this aggressive effort that Ryan and his team did. And the mayor, I was just on a phone call with the mayor of Indianapolis yesterday. I'm on a committee called the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, and the mayor addressed it and talked about the upcoming tournament. The mayor said he gave the sports corporation and Ryan and his team all the credit for having that much foresight to put that plan in place. And so, but it's all that history, and it's the relationships, and it's doing things like the Super Bowl and Final Fours, doing them spectacularly in terms of the volunteers and all the companies who are involved and engaged. And that has been part of the secret sauce. The one last thing I'll say before I open up for questions is, we are blessed in this city and state to have the Lilly Endowment centered here. Today is the second largest endowment in the country. I think now only second to Bill and Linda Gates Foundation. And of course, the Lilly stock has been doing phenomenally well. So the foundation has been doing phenomenally well. But they were involved in the move of the NCAA here. They're involved in so many different initiatives. Some of them I'm sure you all are involved in with different non-for-profits around our state and with our universities. We are really fortunate, going all the way back to Colonel Eli Lilly, the founding of Lilly. Of course, we're fortunate to have Lilly, but the foundation, they were so thoughtful to leave, a decent chunk of Lilly stock, which now has grown into, a close to $20 billion foundation in our home state, which is still paying dividends. And now they invest a huge portion of that into our communities. So I'll stop there and take any questions and on any front that you would like and a discussion you'd like to have. Thank you for letting me come and talk to your group.
Thanks, Nate. We have a ton of really great questions in the chat, so I'm going to kind of throw them at you and we'll see how many we can get through. Mm-hmm. You had talked a little bit about the legislature and the state controlling some of the decisions made in Indy. As citizens, as business owners and leaders, what can we do? What action can we take specific to the current session and then longer term thinking?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there, luckily, a lot of business leaders did come out. About 60 of our, the largest businesses signed a letter that would address just this, the topic that I mentioned. And so, so that's positive. That happened. But I think, there is a need for a larger voice from small businesses too. And I don't think a lot of times the small businesses get heard as often as the CEO of Lilly or Salesforce or what have you. And it's a good question. I mean, certainly, writing op-eds, is always helpful, maybe less helpful than it used to be because there's so much noise out there. I don't know. I used to know a lot about the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Some of you may be part of that group. They usually are pretty active on these types of things, but I can't recall what they did or didn't do on this front. There's certainly the opportunity to write and to voice. You can organize and have harder today with COVID to do some of these things in terms of organizing and protests or what have you. But I think trying to find different ways to obviously calling your state rep is always a helpful one. And sometimes that's the most helpful, because when they start hearing from constituents that this is boneheaded, that sometimes makes a difference. So lots of different avenues.
Perfect, thank you. Personal question for you. I'll combine a couple that were in the chat. Can you talk about influences that you had as you were coming into your career and moving through your career? Any mentors that you had, sort of how your career path was shaped, and then thinking about that, any advice you would have given to your younger self?
That's a good question. So, I've written about mentors, because mentors have been really, really important to me. I've had a lot. I first had some great family mentors. In particular, my grandfather, who always told me stories about growing up in the Great Depression and not being able to go to Purdue because he lost all his money in the bank in LaPorte, Indiana, when he went to go get his dollars out he had saved after working on the farm fields. And he was a huge inspiration, because he was a pull yourself up from the bootstraps guy who built his own businesses, small businesses, and knew the value of hard work. So he had a huge impact on me. My uncle was involved in local and state politics, had a huge impact on me. And so public service has always been important to me. And then I had an amazing mentor of two people in particular here in Indiana since 2003. The first was Mitch Daniels, and I still count him as a mentor. I got to go work with him and side by side in economic development, and Mickey Maurer, who I mentioned earlier, same thing. Both of those guys are brilliant in the business world, have both brilliant business minds. Mitch has a brilliant political and business. He's got kind of a rare thing that not a lot of people have. Those people were important. And then I had other mentors along the way. In practicing law, I had good mentors. And so, I think, for me, when I often do talk to young people graduating from IU, both undergrad and law school. And the thing I always say is, you really need to think about your path and what you want to achieve in life, because otherwise it's really hard to get there. And for me, I kind of knew there were a few things I wanted to achieve in life, and I tried really hard to find people that had done something similar to what I wanted to do, both in business and public service. When I went to Russia, there was a guy here locally. His name's Ed Delaney, who was one of the only guys in town that had any experience in Russia. He was a lawyer at Barnes and Thornburg. Now he's a state rep. And I went to him way back when I was in law school. I said, how the heck do I get to Russia? So I mean, being aggressive and following up, I realized pretty quickly in life that somebody said it earlier at the opening of our meeting, the squeaky wheel basically gets the grease. I realized if you're not aggressive going out there and asking and trying to learn people's stories and what made them successful, it makes your path harder. So I try to do a lot of that.
So you do a lot. You're involved in a lot. I'm sure you're tapped to do things that more than you can take on. How do you determine what to say yes and what to say no to?
Oh my gosh, I still can't figure that one out. That one's really, really hard for all of us, I think. Those are tricky life balances. I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, so I try to spend as much time as I can with them. They're both active in sports, which means mom and dad are really active, moving them around place to place. But it's a really hard one, and I've tried to again look to some of what my mentors have done. Again, Mickey Maurer, he has a system, and I've tried to adopt parts of his system, but I don't think I've quite got it. In terms of where you hold meetings, I live on the north side, but I come downtown, and so trying to figure out where you're going to be, and it's hard. I mean, as I've gotten older, I have learned to say no more. And because I want to focus on things I care the most about, right? And some of that's family, some of that is things that really interest me, like where our city and state, is going, and wanting it to be as successful as we can as a Hoosier state and the city. And now, when I say city, I mean broader region of central Indiana. I grew up in the South Bend area, and I care about South Bend too, but I don't spend, I don't live there now. And so I don't spend as much time on those types of issues, but it's hard. That's an ever-present challenge. I think we all face as business owners and people involved in the community. It's a difficult thing, but I have gotten a little bit better at saying no.
I appreciate knowing it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
So in our last couple minutes, tell us about Russia. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Your experience.
Well, if you haven't been to Russia, I highly recommend it. I don't recommend the government very much, but the city, I mean, the place and the people and the history and the culture is unbelievably rich. And I love going back, and knock on wood, barring anything with COVID, et cetera, I'll be back this fall to Moscow and St. Petersburg. I love it. Just like I said, the history and the culture. If you ever want to watch a great series from the 80s, watch The Americans, which I just binge watched, and people have been telling me to watch it, and I never watched it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't watch it. Watched it in 3 weeks, like 13 episodes, per season, and 6 seasons, and it's fantastic. But I kind of fell in love with the culture and the history and what was going to happen in the early 90s. I went to the Soviet Union for the first time in 1990 as a sophomore at IU studying Russian language. I was interested in the geopolitics of the time. I grew up, I came to age during Reagan and like I said, the 80s. And, I just became incredibly passionate, wanted to learn the language, and then wanted to study and live there. In the 90s, could not have been a crazier time to be there. It was pretty heady times. I worked for a law firm as a first-year law associate. I was getting thrown things I shouldn't have been, in the middle of. But that's how you learn when you're a young law student or a young lawyer. And I had the time of my life, and so I'm always a huge proponent of study abroad. I think it opens up your horizon and your life. And now, with the Liberty Fund, which we didn't have time to get to, but if anybody has an interest, certainly follow up with me. With Liberty Fund, I get to travel all over the world and meet amazing people, and that, to me, that's a big part for continuing education. As an adult and forever, lifelong learning is really important to me. And if I didn't have that ability, I'd be, just not as happy and satisfied in life. So that's a big part of who I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. I'll turn it back over to you to close out.
Well, Nate, we're just going to add an hour to the Zoom and pick your brain some more. So kind of rehashing some of those points. Ryan Vaughn had spoke to us in October, and he actually gave you all the credit for all the positive things going on in the city. So that was a fascinating presentation by Ryan, and it's good to hear you sing his praises, because it was a Wabash guy actually in his same fraternity, Sigma Chi, around the same time he was there, introduced me to my wife. So good for Wabash, good for those meatheads in Sigma Chi. But if you need someone to carry your bags in Russia, I'm there, man. Like, that's on my bucket list. My dad was actually a Russian double major with mechanical engineering at Naval Academy.
Oh wow!
So growing up in the 80s, his plane they loaded with bombs in Bosnia. So he flew P-3 sub hunters, kind of Cold War relics in North Atlantic. But so, yeah, you ever bump into someone from Ukraine, he throws out the last 3 sentences of Russian that he remembers from his time. And I think to your point of just perpetually learning and evolving and making yourself a better, whether it's entrepreneur or philanthropist, I feel like that part of your brain, when you're not necessarily studying your enemy, but sort of studying your adversary, it applies to everything you do in life and just makes you a deeper and deeper person along the way. So again, Nate, thanks so much for your time today. We will be presenting a small donation to the Pashu Foundation, helping our at-risk youth with food security. Please join us next week as we have Julia Whitehead, founder and CEO with founder and CEO, and Drew Simone with Vonnegut Library presenting on the Galapagos. So I'll be in my self-made Galapagos basement for a video.
You'll
So-
enjoy Julie. She's fantastic. Julie is pretty awesome. So you'll enjoy that. And I appreciate being with all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you.
No, thanks again. We appreciate it very much. So we are going to vote on meeting in person in April, tentatively that April 8th, second Thursday. We'll look at maybe reconnecting downtown the Columbia Club. Nate, we've been virtual for the past year, like a lot of society. And as vaccines have ramped up, I think April is when we're going to start dipping our toes back in the water for one meeting in person a month. So we'll keep you posted there. We've got.
I get my vaccine today. Woo!
Oh, congratulations. That's right. Yeah, you're 50. Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, we'll get ours in April. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Work through those details. But no, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week. Again, thanks to Nate and your staff for
Thank you.
helping this happen today. So everybody have a nice rest of your afternoon. The meeting's adjourned.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe, everybody. Be good. Be blessed.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Stay safe.
You too.
Thanks for that information. It was a good meeting. Thank you.